"Stop, don't do that," they warned, but the rancher went ahead anyway, sparking the town's fury. The small town of Redstone Ridge lay cradled between the jagged cliffs of Virelia's northern plateau and the rolling hills of the southern plains. Dust swirled along the dirt roads as the sun rose over the colony, casting a warm orange glow across the modest wooden homes and corrugated metal barns. The town was quiet at first light, except for the distant low hum of wind turbines lining the edges of the settlement, capturing the planet's strange, erratic winds to provide power. Jed Carter stood outside his farmhouse, boots sinking slightly into the dry, cracked earth. His hat shaded his sharp, weathered eyes as he surveyed the open plain stretching north toward the plateau. Beyond that rise lay the northern expanse, untamed and dangerous. The townsfolk called it the Storm Lands, for no one dared spend much time there. Electromagnetic storms frequently whipped across the cliffs, and strange readings from early exploration drones suggested the area might be home to unknown life forms. Jed, however, was undeterred. He had come to Virelia not to play it safe, but to carve a life on the frontier. He loved the land, the quiet mornings, the smell of dry grass, and most of all, the challenge. To him, danger was part of the adventure, not a warning to retreat. "Jed," a voice called from the porch of the farmhouse. It was Mara, his younger sister, holding a steaming mug of synthesized coffee. Her brow was furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You've been staring at that plateau for hours. Are you really planning to go through with this?" Jed tipped his hat back, revealing a slight grin. "Of course, Mara. The land up there is perfect for the herd. I've been thinking about expanding for months. These plains can only hold so many cattle." Mara shook her head, her dark hair catching the morning light. "Jed, the town warned you. We've seen what happens in the northern plateau. Drones get fried. Strange lights appear in the night. Even old man Harris said he saw something moving out there." Jed's grin widened slightly, though his eyes remained serious. "Harris sees strange things every time he steps outside. Look, Mara, I appreciate the concern, I really do. But humans adapt, that's what we do. We figure it out, that's why we're here." Mara's lips pressed tighter together. "Adapt? Jed, you're stubborn. This isn't like building a barn or herding a few cows in the plains. That plateau, it's different, it's dangerous. And the town—" "I know what the town thinks," Jed interrupted gently. He took the mug from Mara, savoring the warmth. "They're scared, and that's fine. Fear keeps people alive, but it doesn't mean we stop living." Mara set her hands on her hips, her concern radiating in every gesture. "You could get hurt, or worse." Jed laughed softly, a sound roughened by years in the sun and wind. "I'm not going to get hurt. I've been out in storms before. I know how to handle the land. And besides," he paused, letting the silence stretch for a moment, "if I don't try, who will?" Mara looked at him, frustration and worry warring with admiration. Jed had always been like this, fearless, stubborn, impossible to argue with once he set his mind on something. She sighed, finally conceding with a small nod. "Just be careful, Jed. Promise me." "I promise," he said simply, though neither of them knew how much that promise meant when facing the unpredictable wilds of Virelia. By mid-morning, the town square was bustling. Market stalls displayed rough textiles, hydroponic vegetables, and mechanical tools, while children chased one another through dusty streets. Despite the normalcy, there was a tension in the air. Word had spread quickly. Jed Carter intended to move his herd into the northern plateau. At the town council hall, Mayor Harlan banged his gavel against the wooden desk, calling the room to order. The townsfolk gathered, murmuring anxiously. Redstone Ridge was small and everyone knew one another. Every action had consequences, and Jed's plans were no small action. "We cannot allow him to go up there," Mayor Harlan said firmly, his voice echoing in the hall. His silver hair glimmered under the lantern light, his eyes sharp and watchful. "The readings from our drones are clear. The plateau is unstable. Strange phenomena, dangerous storms, and possibly life forms beyond our understanding. If Jed goes ahead, he's risking everything, including our town's safety. Jed leaned against the doorway, calm and silent. He didn't speak immediately, letting the town's unease settle like dust around him. Councilwoman Lee, an engineer, stood and addressed the room. Mayor, the sensors confirm what the old exploration logs suggested. Electromagnetic interference is strong there. Any machinery could fail. Drones vanish without explanation. And while we've never confirmed intelligent life, there's evidence of structures. Possibly nests or dwellings. It's not just a hazard, it could be inhabited. Murmurs swept the room. A few brave voices argued for Jed, citing his experience and success with the herd. But the majority, worried parents and farmers with families to protect, were resolute. Jed finally spoke. "I respect your concerns, I really do, but I've spent years on this land. I know cattle, I know the plains, and I know humans adapt faster than machines. You're scared of the unknown, and that's understandable. But fear doesn't feed anyone, and it doesn't protect the town. Preparation and courage do." The room fell silent, some nodding reluctantly, others shaking their heads in frustration. The argument ended with no consensus. Jed would go. And the town, though uneasy, had no real power to stop him. That evening, Jed prepared his herd for the journey. The cattle stirred nervously, sensing the unusual energy in the air. He checked every harness, every crate, every piece of equipment. Drones hovered above, mapping the safest paths, while Jed and his small team plotted the route along the plateau's lower slopes, hoping to avoid the most unstable regions. As twilight settled, the sky ignited with streaks of violet and gold. The distant northern plateau shimmered with an eerie glow. Some of the townsfolk gathered at the edge of the plains, watching silently. Mara stood among them, her hands clenched into fists, her jaw tight with worry. "Jed," she called, her voice barely carrying in the wind, "please be careful." Jed waved, his silhouette framed by the twin moons of Virlia. "I will," he replied. His voice was steady, reassuring, though he could feel the thrill of uncertainty coursing through him. The herd moved forward, kicking up dust that caught the last rays of the sun. As they approached the base of the plateau, the wind picked up, whistling through jagged rocks. Machines beeped warning signals intermittently, but Jed remained calm, guiding the herd with practiced patience. Night fell, and the plateau loomed like a dark giant ahead. Jed set up a temporary camp for the herd, lighting small controlled fires to keep them calm. The strange lights from the plateau flickered, distant and irregular. Shadows moved between rocks, too quick to identify. Jed didn't sleep much. He walked the perimeter, listening to the low hums and crackles of energy in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a drone sparked and fell, its remains smoldering. He shrugged. Drones were tools, humans were smarter. Humans adapted. By dawn, Jed had planned the next leg of the journey. The plateau was formidable, but the herd was healthy, the equipment intact, and his team alert. For the first time, the real risk seemed to touch him directly. The air was thicker here, almost electric. He could feel it pulling at his hair, making his skin tingle. But Jed Carter did what humans always did. He faced the unknown, not with fear, but with determination. The plateau was dangerous, yes, but it was also opportunity. And Jed intended to prove, once and for all, that humans could endure what no machine, no warning, and no alien presence could stop. The warning from the town still echoed in his mind, a constant hum at the back of his thoughts. "Stop, don't do that." Jed smiled faintly. He didn't intend to stop. He stepped forward, leading the herd into the northern plateau, toward danger, mystery, and a future only humans could forge. The northern plateau stretched ahead like a frozen sea of jagged rocks, deep crevices, and strange, shimmering lights. The sun was just peeking over the cliffs, sending long shadows across the terrain. Jed Carter adjusted his hat, squinting at the sharp edges of the plateau. He could feel the tension in the air, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting. Behind him, his herd moved cautiously, lowing softly. Their hooves clattered against the uneven rocks, echoing across the cliffs. Jed's team of ranchers, only 3 men and 1 young woman, kept close. Each carried tools, emergency equipment, and makeshift weapons, mostly for safety against natural hazards, not anything else. Still, everyone felt the strange energy vibrating through the ground. Jed, called Marcus, a tall, wiry rancher with a habit of worrying too much, look at that. Did you see that light just over the ridge? Jed didn't turn immediately. His eyes stayed on the path ahead. Yeah, he said calmly. It's nothing we haven't seen before. Probably a reflection or some minerals in the rocks. Stay focused on the herd. But even Jed couldn't ignore the growing unease. The plateau seemed alive. Shadows moved in ways that didn't match the terrain, and the occasional low hum resonated through the air. Every now and then, a strange flicker of light would dart across the cliffs, disappearing as quickly as it came. By midday, they had reached a small plateau ledge. Jed set up a temporary camp to rest the herd and check equipment. Drones hovered above, scanning the surroundings, but one by one their cameras flickered and went dead. Jed crouched beside Marcus, examining the latest drone. Its circuits had fried, smoke curling from the blackened panel. That's 2 drones lost, Marcus said, frustration in his voice. Jed, maybe we should go back. Jed shook his head. No, we're fine. Drones are tools. Humans are. He patted the young cow in front of him. We adapt. That's why we're here. Remember that. Marcus muttered under his breath, unconvinced, while Lena, the youngest member of the team, checked on the herd. The cattle are nervous, she said softly. Something's out there. I can feel it in the air. Jed sighed and looked at the distant cliffs. I know. That's why we move carefully. We don't rush. 1 step at a time. The first real sign of danger came in the late afternoon. A sudden wind gust swept across the plateau, carrying with it a strange static that made the hair on the back of Jed's neck stand up. The herd panicked, lowing and stamping. Some animals tried to bolt toward the cliffs, their hooves scraping against sharp rocks. Jed jumped between them, shouting commands, waving his arms. He used the small drone still working to guide the animals, projecting light patterns to calm them. Easy, easy, everyone, keep moving together. But it wasn't just the wind. In the distance, dark shapes emerged between the rocks. Shadows, massive and moving with impossible speed. They didn't run like animals but glided as if floating above the jagged cliffs. Jed froze, watching. His heart pounded, but he reminded himself, humans adapt. The shadows approached cautiously at first, circling the herd. Then almost simultaneously, a low, resonating sound filled the air. It was not a roar, not a growl, something else entirely. Jed felt it in his chest, vibrating through him. Even the cattle froze, their ears twitching, eyes wide with fear. Stay calm, Jed muttered to his team, more to convince himself than them. We observe, we react, nothing more. For hours they stayed on the ledge, watching the shadows move. They were unlike anything Jed had ever seen. They had vaguely humanoid shapes, but elongated limbs and glimmering, translucent skin. Eyes, or something like eyes, shone faintly in the fading light. Jed realized quickly that direct confrontation was impossible. Their speed and power far exceeded human capability. Jed, Lena whispered, her voice trembling. Are they dangerous? Jed shook his head. I don't know yet, but humans survive by thinking, not by fighting blindly. We watch, we learn, that's what we'll do. The team spent the night on high alert. Fires were kept low to avoid attracting attention, and the herd huddled close. The strange creatures remained in the distance, moving silently, their glowing forms disappearing and reappearing like ghostly lanterns. Despite the fear, Jed couldn't help but admire them. They were intelligent, cautious, and unlike anything Earth had ever produced. This was a test, a challenge, and humans were built to rise to challenges. The next morning, the plateau offered a clearer view of the terrain. Crags and crevices twisted across the land, some glowing faintly from minerals charged by the planet's electromagnetic energy. Jed checked the drones again. 3 more had malfunctioned, sparks flying. "Looks like the plateau doesn't like our machines," Marcus muttered. Jed nodded. "That's fine. Machines are tools, not answers. Humans can solve problems even when tools fail." He studied the herd carefully, noting their reactions to the environment. Cattle avoided glowing rocks but seemed drawn to calmer patches of grass between the crags. Jed realized that, just like people, animals could read the dangers of the plateau instinctively. That instinct would be key to navigating the area safely. Suddenly, a sharp screech cut through the air. Jed whipped around, seeing one of the creatures leap from a cliff and land behind the herd. It moved faster than any human could, almost liquid in its motion. The herd panicked, scattering in all directions. Jed ran, grabbing the nearest cow and guiding it back. Lena and Marcus followed, herding as best they could. For the first time, Jed felt genuine fear, but not panic. Fear, he reminded himself, was a tool if used correctly. It focused attention, sharpened reflexes. Humans had survived countless disasters because they didn't freeze, they adapted. Using light, sound, and sheer presence, Jed and his team guided the herd away from the creature. It hesitated, studying their patterns, but didn't attack directly. Jed realized something crucial. The creatures were intelligent. They were observing, learning, and reacting. "See that?" Jed said, pointing. "They're testing us. Humans don't run blindly, we adapt. That's our advantage." The encounter left the team shaken but alive. Jed used the opportunity to study the creatures, noting how they responded to light and movement. He adjusted their camp setup, creating barriers with reflective materials and low fires that emitted specific patterns. By trial and error, they discovered that certain sounds made the creatures hesitant, giving the herd time to move safely. Days passed with small skirmishes and tense encounters. The plateau was unpredictable, but the humans adapted faster than the creatures could anticipate. Drones failed, tools broke, and conditions worsened, but each challenge was met with innovation. Marcus built improvised magnetic netting to protect the herd. Lena modified the lights to flash in patterns the creatures didn't like, and Jed coordinated movement with a precision that reminded the team why he was considered the best rancher on the planet. The townsfolk, watching remotely through backup drones, were terrified. Some argued that Jed was reckless. Others marveled at his skill. But there was no denying the results. Humans could survive here, even when the land and its inhabitants seemed to defy understanding. One evening, as the twin moons of Virely arose, casting pale light across the plateau, Jed stood at the edge of a cliff. Below, the herd grazed cautiously, shadows moving far in the distance. The creatures had learned to keep their distance, but their glowing eyes followed every motion. Jed took a deep breath. "Humans survive," he said quietly to himself. "We always do. We think, we plan, we act. No creature, no storm, no unknown force can stop us if we're smart enough." Lena joined him, her eyes wide with awe. "Jed, they're incredible, but we're incredible too." Jed nodded. "Exactly. Humans adapt. Humans endure. Humans rise." For the first time, the plateau didn't seem quite so hostile. It was a challenge, yes, but humans thrived on challenges. And Jed Carter intended to show the creatures, the land, and even the town that humans could endure what no other species could. The warning from Redstone Ridge still echoed in his mind, faint but persistent. "Stop, don't do that." Jed smiled faintly, adjusting his hat. He didn't intend to stop. He turned back toward the herd, ready for whatever came next. The plateau was alive, unpredictable, and dangerous. But humans had faced worse, and survived. And on this strange, distant world, that would be enough to turn fear into triumph. The news of Jed Carter's encounters in the northern plateau spread through Redstone Ridge like wildfire. At first, the townsfolk whispered about his recklessness. But as reports came in, drones destroyed, strange creatures observed, herds shaken but surviving, fear and fascination mixed in equal measure. Mayor Harlan called an emergency council meeting in the town hall. The wooden room was crowded with farmers, engineers, ranchers, and a few teachers who had stayed behind to monitor the situation remotely. The air buzzed with tension. Every eye in the room turned toward the mayor as he began to speak. "Jed Carter is out there," Mayor Harlan said, his voice firm. "He's brave, yes, but he's facing forces we barely understand. Our town is watching, and our people could be at risk if he needs help." Councilwoman Lee, the town's engineer, leaned forward. "Mayor, we've been reviewing the live feeds. The creatures are intelligent. They are studying Jed and the herd. We can't just send supplies blindly. We need strategy." Marcus Doyle, a burly rancher who had volunteered to help Jed if needed, slammed his fist on the desk. "Strategy? Jed's been surviving out there using his head and the herd. He doesn't need a town full of scared people second-guessing him. But if they're learning, we need to be smarter too." Mayor Harlan nodded. "Exactly. We're going to help Jed, but we must do it in a way that works. Everyone will split into teams. Engineers and technicians will modify the drones and create new tools. Farmers and ranchers will design protective measures for the herd. Everyone must think creatively. If humans are clever, we can match these creatures and give Jed an advantage." Back on the plateau, Jed and his team continued their careful navigation of the jagged terrain. The creatures had begun to circle more actively, keeping the humans constantly alert. Each movement required planning, and every mistake could result in disaster. A flicker of light caught Jed's eye. He crouched beside a rock to observe. The creatures were moving in a pattern now, almost as if they were mapping human behavior. Jed realized something vital. These creatures learned quickly. Any advantage humans gained would only last until the creatures adapted. "We need to stay unpredictable," Jed told his team. "The creatures can't adapt if we keep changing our tactics. Watch the herd. Keep moving. Think ahead." Lena adjusted a drone, which emitted flashing patterns to distract the creatures. One of them hesitated, shifting its glowing eyes from side to side. The other team members followed Jed's lead, using small reflective devices to create confusion. The creatures retreated slightly. Jed smiled faintly. "Good. Humans think that's our strength." Meanwhile, the town's efforts began to take shape. Engineers worked tirelessly to modify the drones, adding shielding against electromagnetic interference. Farmers experimented with magnetic nets and sound emitters to guide the herd and discourage the creatures from approaching. By the next morning, a small convoy of modified drones and protective gear was ready. Marcus, now in charge of logistics, explained the plan to Mayor Harlan. "We'll send supplies and backup devices directly to Jed's location. The drones will project lights and sounds that the creatures find confusing. Nets will give the herd a safe boundary, and the team can experiment with movement patterns. Jed will coordinate everything. He's the only one who knows the terrain that well." Mayor Harlan nodded, approving the plan. "Make it happen. Human ingenuity has never failed us before. Let's show it works here too." Jed's camp received the first wave of modified drones late in the afternoon. They hovered over the plateau, whirring softly, projecting patterned lights and sounds. The herd immediately responded, moving closer together and calming down. Jed studied the creatures' reaction carefully. "They're cautious," Jed observed. "They don't understand what these lights mean. That gives us control. We can guide the herd without confrontation." The creatures, watching from a distance, moved hesitantly. They were intelligent, yes, but the humans' adaptability was even more evident. Jed realized that the plateau was no longer just a dangerous place. It was a testing ground for human ingenuity. The team experimented with different patterns of movement and light. They discovered that alternating flashes with varying speeds confused the creatures, while synchronized herd movements reinforced their safety. By evening, a small challenge escalated into a full encounter. A group of creatures emerged from the cliffs, moving in formation toward the herd. Jed quickly assessed the situation. The drones were ready, the nets deployed, and the team in position. "Remember," Jed shouted, "we don't fight blindly, we think. We adapt. We win because we're clever." He directed the herd to move in a circular pattern while the drones flashed lights in erratic sequences. The creatures paused, puzzled. Jed's team activated the magnetic nets, which created subtle barriers. The creatures hesitated again, testing the boundaries but unable to breach them. "Keep moving," Jed called. "Humans adapt." The encounter lasted for hours, with the creatures learning and adapting and the humans responding faster. Every time the creatures tried a new tactic, Jed and his team countered with something unexpected. By nightfall, the creatures had retreated to a safe distance, leaving the herd unharmed. Jed allowed himself a small smile. "Humans survive because we think, not because we overpower. That's our strength." Back in Redstone Ridge, the town monitored the live feeds. There was excitement now, mixed with relief. Humans had faced danger and had not only survived but outsmarted it. Children watched from the school windows, imagining themselves as explorers and problem solvers like Jed. Councilwoman Lee addressed the crowd, her voice proud. "Look at them. They are showing exactly why humans thrive. We adapt. We innovate. We don't rely on luck. We create solutions." Marcus Doyle nodded. "That's right. These creatures may be stronger, faster, smarter in some ways, but humans, we outthink them. That's why we endure. That's why we win." Even Mayor Harlan allowed a rare smile. "Jed may have been reckless, yes. But we see now that the risk was worth it. Humans are incredible." The next day, Jed's team pushed further into the plateau. They experimented with more advanced techniques, combining light patterns, herd movements, and sound pulses to guide the animals. Each attempt improved their understanding of the creatures and the terrain. One remarkable discovery came when a herd cow reacted in a way Jed hadn't expected. As the animal stepped over a glowing mineral patch, the creatures seemed hesitant. Jed observed closely. "They respect instinct," he said. "Not just human planning. They notice natural behavior too. That gives us even more leverage." The team began to incorporate instinctive responses from the herd into their strategy. They noticed that if cattle moved calmly and purposefully, the creatures kept a distance. When the humans panicked, the creatures became more aggressive. Jed realized that humans and animals could work together seamlessly. Intelligence, observation, and cooperation formed a network stronger than brute force. That evening, the creatures attempted a more coordinated approach. They moved in a semicircle toward the herd, testing the humans' defenses. Jed watched carefully. "Ready?" he asked Lena and Marcus. "Ready," they replied in unison. Jed signaled the herd to move in a spiral formation while activating the drone lights. The creatures hesitated, unsure of how to respond. As they inched forward, they encountered the magnetic netting. Confused, they circled back. Jed directed the herd to reverse direction suddenly, throwing the creatures off balance. For the first time, the creatures hesitated long enough for Jed to see an opportunity. Using a series of synchronized light and sound cues, he guided the herd across a safer patch of the plateau. The creatures followed for a few moments but ultimately could not break the humans' control over the situation. "Humans adapt," Jed muttered, exhausted but triumphant. "That's why we survive." By nightfall, the plateau was quiet. The creatures had retreated to a distance, observing but not approaching. Jed's team was tired but exhilarated. They had survived another day and had done so using brains, courage, and innovation. Jed looked at the horizon. The plateau was still dangerous, still unpredictable, but the humans had proven something important. Cleverness, teamwork, and determination could overcome even the unknown. "Tomorrow," Jed said, "we push further. We learn more." Humans don't stop when the unknown appears. We thrive. Lena smiled, her eyes reflecting the glow of the twin moons. We're proving that, Jed. Humans really are incredible. Jed nodded. He knew the creatures would adapt, but he also knew humans would adapt faster. The town's support, the herd's instincts, and the team's creativity formed a force stronger than any fear. Redstone Ridge had doubted him, warned him, and feared for him. But here, on the plateau, the humans were showing the true power of adaptability, intelligence, and courage. The creatures might have been strong, fast, and mysterious, but humans were unpredictable, relentless, and brilliant. And that was a combination no force on Virelia could ignore. The plateau had grown more unpredictable by the morning. The creatures no longer hesitated. They had begun to anticipate the human strategies. Their movements were sharper, faster, and more coordinated. Even the drones, with their flashing lights and patterned sounds, seemed less effective. Jed Carter studied the horizon carefully, noting every movement in the shadows. "They're learning," he said quietly. His voice carried over the small team gathered beside him. "Humans adapt, but so do they. We need something new, something they can't predict." Marcus Doyle rubbed his jaw. "Jed, we've tried everything. Lights, sound, the spiral herd tactic, they're getting used to it. What else can we do?" Jed didn't answer immediately. He looked at the herd grazing nearby. The cattle's instincts had been a key advantage before, guiding them through danger and confusing the creatures. Then it hit him. "We're forgetting something important. We've been acting like it's all about the drones and lights, but we haven't listened to the creatures." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Listen to them," Jed nodded. "Not literally, but pay attention to their patterns. They respond to movement, to sound, to energy. We need to understand what triggers their hesitation. We need to find their weakness, and it's not strength, it's perception." The next several hours were spent observing. The creatures moved in intricate patterns, avoiding certain mineral patches and responding to the herd's instincts. Jed's team took careful notes, marking which behaviors caused hesitation and which caused aggression. "It's like a dance," Jed explained. "If we step the right way, they hesitate. If we step wrong, they attack. We've been improvising, but now we need choreography. Every movement matters." Marcus scratched his head. "And the sounds, the drones." Jed gestured toward them. "Keep them, but instead of patterns, make the sounds random, unpredictable. Combine that with controlled herd movement. The creatures won't know what to expect. We take the advantage back." By late afternoon, the humans were ready. Jed arranged the herd in a semicircle near a glowing ridge. The drones hovered above, projecting lights that flickered unpredictably. Marcus and Lena held small devices that emitted varied tones. Jed took a deep breath. "Remember, we're not fighting. We're guiding. We're teaching. Humans adapt. That's what they can't handle. Move when I signal. Stay calm, stay focused." The creatures appeared, moving faster than before, their glowing forms almost fluid. They tested the humans' perimeter, darting back and forth, probing for weaknesses. Jed held up his hand. The herd shifted, following his subtle command. The creatures hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Now," Jed shouted. The team activated the sound devices in random bursts, while the drones flashed irregularly. The herd moved in synchronized, deliberate steps across the plateau. The creatures, momentarily confused, withdrew. Jed could see the hesitation in their movements. It was brief, but it was enough. "Good," Jed muttered. "Humans adapt. We always find a way." Over the next few hours, the humans repeated the process, experimenting with slight variations in movement, sound, and light. Each time, the creatures responded, adapting, learning, but the humans adapted faster. They began to understand subtle behavioral cues. When a creature tilted its glowing head, it was evaluating a new tactic. When it circled slowly, it was hesitant. When it darted quickly, it was testing aggression. "This is more than survival," Jed said to Lena and Marcus. "It's strategy, observation, intelligence. Humans don't rely on power, we rely on brains, and that's what wins. Marcus nodded, finally understanding. We're not just moving the herd, we're controlling the situation. Exactly, Jed said. We're teaching the plateau we belong here, not through force but through smarts, and that's the difference between humans and everything else. That night, the creatures attempted a coordinated approach unlike anything Jed had seen. Multiple groups moved from different angles trying to encircle the herd. The team tensed, ready to respond. Jed signaled the herd to begin a slow spiral movement. The creatures paused, hesitant. Then he activated the random sound devices. The creatures froze again, unsure how to react. The drones flickered erratically, adding confusion. Step by step, the humans guided the herd across the plateau, keeping the creatures at bay. The creatures followed for a short distance but eventually retreated. Jed realized they were testing boundaries, trying to understand the humans' limits, but humans always exceeded them. "See that?" Jed whispered to Lena. "They're smart, but humans are smarter when we cooperate, observe, and adapt. That's the key." Lena smiled. "I never thought herding could be like warfare." Jed laughed softly. "It's not just herding, it's survival, strategy, and intelligence. Humans do it best." The next morning, Jed decided it was time for a bolder plan. They would push further into the plateau, not just reacting but controlling territory. The creatures had learned to avoid certain behaviors, but humans could create new patterns that would give them dominance. Jed organized the team. "We'll use the herd instinctively, combined with random sound bursts and light patterns. But we'll also create safe zones along the path, marked by reflective panels and magnetic barriers. That way, the creatures can't surprise us. We move, they follow, we control the situation." Marcus looked skeptical. "And if they attack anyway?" Jed smiled. "Then we adapt. Humans always adapt." The plan began in the late afternoon. The herd moved in precise patterns, guided by Jed and the team. The creatures approached cautiously, testing every barrier, every light, every sound. For a moment it seemed they might break through, but then the team adjusted. They shifted the herd, changed the sound sequence, and activated the drones in unexpected bursts. The creatures faltered, unsure how to proceed. Jed watched carefully, his mind calculating every possibility. Finally, the creatures withdrew, retreating to the cliffs. Humans had regained control, not through force, but through superior observation, adaptability, and planning. "Humans survive," Jed said softly, watching the glowing forms disappear into the distance. "We endure because we think, because we cooperate, because we adapt. No one else can do that like us." By evening, the humans had mapped the plateau more thoroughly. They knew which areas were safe, which areas the creatures avoided, and how to guide the herd effectively. Jed realized they had reached a turning point. The plateau was no longer just a challenge. It was territory humans could control through intelligence, observation, and adaptability. He gathered the team. "This is what humans do," he said. "We face danger, we study it, we adapt, and we overcome. The creatures are powerful, but humans are cleverer. And cleverness wins where strength fails." Lena nodded. "We've turned the plateau into our advantage." Jed smiled faintly. "Exactly. And tomorrow we push even further. Humans thrive because we think, because we plan, because we refuse to be intimidated." The creatures, observing from the distance, began to adjust their tactics. They had learned humans were unpredictable, clever, and cooperative. But Jed knew one thing: humans could adapt faster. Every time the creatures tried a new approach, humans found a new response. By nightfall, the plateau was quiet. The herd rested and the humans sat together, exhausted but triumphant. Jed gazed at the horizon, the twin moons casting silver light over the jagged cliffs. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we go further. We learn more. Humans adapt, humans endure, humans survive. That's what we do." For the first time, Jed felt a sense of calm. The creatures had been challenging, intelligent, and dangerous. But the humans had proven their superiority not through force, but through intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. Redstone Ridge may have feared him, but on the plateau, Jed Carter had shown that humans were not only survivors. They were problem solvers, strategists, and masters of adaptation. And on this strange, unpredictable world, that would be enough to ensure that humanity would not just endure, but thrive. The northern plateau glowed softly under the light of Virelia's twin moons. Jagged cliffs cast long shadows, and the strange minerals scattered across the terrain shimmered like stars. For Jed Carter and his team, the plateau was no longer simply a dangerous expanse. It was a proving ground. Each day had taught them something new about the creatures, the land, and themselves. Jed stood at the edge of a ridge, surveying the herd below. They were calm now, grazing in small groups, their movements guided by instinct and the subtle commands of the humans. For the first time, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Humans had turned a dangerous challenge into an opportunity. "We've come a long way," Marcus said, standing beside him. "The creatures aren't just chasing us anymore. They're keeping their distance." Jed nodded. "Exactly. Humans survive not because we're stronger or faster, but because we think, we plan, we adapt. That's why we're here, and that's why we thrive." Lena, adjusting a drone, looked out over the plateau. "I never imagined humans could do this. Even the creatures, they seem to respect us now." Jed smiled faintly. "Not respect in the way we think, but acknowledgement. We've proven that humans are clever, coordinated, and persistent. That's what matters here. On this planet, intelligence and adaptability win over brute strength every time." The next morning, the creatures made a cautious move. This time, they approached from multiple directions simultaneously, testing every perimeter the humans had established. Jed and his team were ready. "Remember," Jed said quietly, "we guide, not fight. The moment we panic, we lose control. Humans adapt, humans endure, humans outthink. That's our strength." Step by step, the team moved the herd using the combination of light, sound, and instinctive guidance they had refined over weeks. The creatures paused, evaluated, then hesitated again as the humans adjusted their strategy. For hours, the creatures tested the humans' patience and planning. Each time, Jed observed, noted, and modified the tactics. The plateau had become a chessboard, with humans and creatures carefully maneuvering across its jagged terrain. Marcus, exhausted but alert, whispered, "Jed, I don't think they're going to break through." Jed didn't respond immediately. He studied the creature's behavior. Then slowly he nodded. "They've learned we're unpredictable, intelligent, and cooperative. They respect that. Humans have won this round." By midday, the plateau was quiet. The creatures had withdrawn to higher cliffs, observing rather than engaging. Jed's team used the opportunity to rest the herd, repair equipment, and review their tactics. "This plateau," Lena said thoughtfully, "it's dangerous, but we've turned it into our advantage." Jed smiled. "Humans do that. We take challenges and turn them into opportunities. That's why we survive where others fail. We adapt, we innovate, we endure. The creatures don't understand our thinking. They only see the results." He crouched beside a cow, running a hand over its warm fur. "The herd has been amazing. We work together, humans and animals, and that's the real strength here. Teamwork, observation, and intelligence. That's what makes humans extraordinary." The following days were spent expanding the humans' control over the plateau. They established safe zones, guided the herd through difficult terrain, and experimented with new patterns of light and sound. The creatures continued to observe from a distance, never approaching aggressively, but always testing the boundaries. Jed realized that this was not just survival anymore, it was coexistence. Humans had established themselves as capable, intelligent, and dominant in a subtle way. The creatures had learned that these humans were not to be underestimated. Marcus grinned. "We're making the plateau safe, and the creatures, they know better than to mess with us now." Jed nodded. Humans endure because we think, because we cooperate, because we refuse to give up. That's what we've shown here. That's what humans always do. One evening, as the twin moons rose high, Jed gathered his team. "We've come far," he said, "but this is only the beginning. The plateau is huge. There are more unknowns ahead. But humans are clever, adaptable, and persistent. That will carry us forward." Lena looked at him with admiration. "Jed, the town, they'll be proud when they see what we've accomplished. Humans really are incredible." Jed chuckled softly. "They'll be proud, yes. But more importantly, they'll understand what humans are capable of when we work together, think carefully, and refuse to be afraid. That's the real lesson." Meanwhile, back in Redstone Ridge, the town had been monitoring the situation closely. Mayor Harlan, Councilwoman Lee, and other townsfolk watched the live feeds of the plateau with awe. "I never thought humans could do this," Councilwoman Lee admitted. "They've turned danger into strategy and strategy into survival." Marcus Doyle, watching the screens alongside them, nodded. "Jed showed us all why humans endure. Not because we're the strongest, not because we're the fastest, but because we think, adapt, and never give up. That's our power." Mayor Harlan leaned back in his chair, a rare smile on his face. "Jed may have been reckless, yes, but he's shown what humans are truly capable. We fear less now because we know our people can overcome even the unknown." Back on the plateau, Jed and his team faced a final challenge. A storm, larger than any they had encountered, swept over the cliffs. Lightning cracked across the sky and wind tore through the rocky ridges. The herd was nervous, the drones struggling to maintain stability. Jed stood firm. "This is it," he said calmly. "Humans endure, humans adapt, humans survive. Everyone stay calm, follow the patterns we practiced, and we'll get through this." Step by step, the herd moved with precision. Drones emitted erratic flashes to guide them, while the team used sound cues to maintain order. The creatures, recognizing the humans' confidence and control, did not approach. Even the storm itself seemed unable to disrupt the humans' coordination. By dawn, the storm had passed. The plateau was battered, but the humans and their herd had survived intact. Jed surveyed the terrain, exhaustion mixed with pride. "We've done it," he said softly. "Humans endure because we think, we cooperate, we refuse to quit. That's what survival means. That's what humans are." The creatures, observing from the distance, retreated further. They no longer attempted direct engagement. Humans had proven their intelligence, adaptability, and perseverance. The plateau was theirs, not by force, but by strategy and ingenuity. Jed looked at his team, each member tired but triumphant. "We've earned this," he said. "Not through power, but through intelligence, teamwork, and courage. Humans are problem solvers. Humans thrive. Humans survive." Lena smiled. "We've shown them. Humans really are incredible." Marcus nodded. "And we'll keep showing it every time we face the unknown." By the next week, Jed's team had fully established safe zones and mapped much of the plateau. They had learned the creatures' patterns, trained the herd to respond instinctively to danger, and built systems that combined human innovation with natural instincts. Jed sent a report back to Redstone Ridge. The town received the news with pride and awe. Humans had faced unknown dangers, intelligent creatures, and harsh terrain, and had not only survived but asserted control through brains, courage, and adaptability. Mayor Harlan addressed the town. "Jed Carter and his team have shown us what humans are truly capable. Fearless, intelligent, resourceful. Humans endure because we adapt. Humans survive because we think. And now we know that nothing, not storm, not unknown life, can stop us when we work together." Jed stood once more on the ridge, gazing at the herd and the plateau. The creatures watched from a distance, acknowledging the humans' capabilities. The wind whispered through the jagged cliffs, carrying with it a sense of respect, not just from the town but from the planet itself. He turned to his team. "This is what humans do. We face challenges, we learn, we adapt, and we overcome. On any planet against any odds, humans endure, and that is why we thrive. For the first time, Jed felt the full weight of their accomplishment. The plateau was no longer a threat, it was proof. Proof that humans could survive, adapt, and triumph even in the most unpredictable circumstances. The herd grazed calmly under the twin moons, the creatures observed from afar, and Jed Carter smiled. Humanity had not only survived, they had earned respect, proven their intelligence, and shown that cleverness and courage could conquer the unknown. The story of the plateau would be remembered in Redstone Ridge for generations, a tale of fear, risk, ingenuity, and ultimate triumph. Humans had faced the unknown and emerged victorious.